Welcome. Tonight there is nothing you need to do and nowhere you need to be. Just settle in, let your breathing slow, and let me tell you the long, quiet story of the pyramids of Egypt. We will start at the very beginning by a slow green river in the desert, and we will travel gently across thousands of years. There is no hurry. You can drift off whenever you like. The story will carry on without you, soft and steady, like sand moving in the dark. A river in the desert before there were kings, before there were stones stacked toward the sky. There was the river. Imagine the land of Egypt as it was long ago, seen from somewhere high and quiet, the way you might see it in a dream. On every side there is desert, pale and endless, the colour of old bone under a wide sky. And through the middle of all that emptiness runs a single ribbon of green. That ribbon is the Nile, and it is the reason for everything that follows. The Nile rises far to the south, in lands of rain and high mountains, and it gathers itself into one great slow river that moves north for thousands of miles. Each year, in the warm months, the rains in the south swell the river until it rises over its banks and spreads quietly across the low fields on either side. The water comes without violence here. It seeps and pools and lingers, and when at last it draws back, it leaves behind a gift. A layer of dark, soft mud, rich and damp, perfect for growing things. The people of Egypt called this black earth Kemet, and they called their whole country by that name, the Black Land, after the dark soil that gave them life. Picture a farmer standing at the edge of his field in the early light, the year very long ago. The flood has gone down. The mud is fresh and gleaming. He carries a handful of seed, and he scatters it across the wet ground, and he knows, the way his father knew, and his father before him, that the river will do the rest. Wheat and barley will rise here. There will be bread, and there will be beer, and there will be enough. In a land ringed by desert, this yearly miracle felt less like luck and more like a promise. The river kept its promise, year after year, for longer than we can easily imagine. And because the river was so steady, the people who lived beside it could become steady too. They did not have to wander. They could build villages of mud brick close to the water. They could store grain. They could keep cattle and fish the shallows and weave reeds from the marshes into baskets and boats and mats. They could begin, slowly, over many generations, to think about more than the next meal. They could begin to think about beauty, and about order, and about what happens to a person after they die. Let yourself rest here for a moment, in this gentle green world by the water. There is the soft sound of the river moving. There are herons standing in the shallows, very still. There is the smell of wet earth and growing things, and the warmth of the sun on the back of your neck. This is where it all begins. Not with grand kings or great monuments, but with mud and seed and patience and a river that always came back. In time, the scattered villages along the Nile began to gather together. Small communities joined into larger ones, and larger ones into kingdoms, until the long land split roughly into two great halves. There was Upper Egypt, the narrow valley in the south where the river ran between cliffs, and there was Lower Egypt, the wide green fan of the delta in the north, where the Nile broke into many branches before reaching the sea. For a long time these two lands were separate, each with its own ways, its own crown, its own quiet pride. Then, according to the old traditions, somewhere around 5,000 years ago, the two lands were brought together under a single ruler. The stories give him different names, and the truth of it is softened now by all the centuries in between, so we will not pretend to know every detail. What matters is the idea. For the first time, the whole long ribbon of the Nile, from the southern cliffs to the northern sea, answered to one king. That king wore a double crown, the white crown of the south fitted inside the red crown of the north, and in that single joined crown you can see the whole shape of the country he ruled. This was the beginning of what we now call dynastic Egypt, the long line of pharaohs that would stretch on for thousands of years. And from the very start, these early kings were concerned with something that would shape everything they built. They were concerned with eternity. To the people of early Egypt, death was not an ending. It was a doorway. They believed that a person who was properly cared for, whose body was preserved, and whose tomb was provided for, could go on living in another world. A quiet country much like this one, but free from hunger and fear. The king, who stood at the very top of the world, was thought to have the longest and most important journey of all into that next life. And so, from the earliest days, the burial of a king was the most serious work a kingdom could undertake. Rest here a little longer. There is no need to follow every thread. Just hold the gentle shape of it in your mind. A river that always returned. Two lands joined into one. And a people who looked at death and did not see darkness, but a long road into another morning. From this calm and patient beginning, stone by stone, the pyramids would slowly rise. The first houses of eternity, the first tombs of Egypt's kings, were not pyramids at all. They were low and flat, and to understand the great pyramids that came later, it helps to begin with these humble beginnings, the way you might begin a long climb with a few easy steps. When an early king died, his people did not yet think to reach for the sky. Instead, they built him a kind of grand mud brick house, low and rectangular, with sloping sides and a flat top. Inside the ground beneath it, they dug chambers to hold his body and the many things he might want in the next life. We call these flat-top tombs by an Arabic word, mastaba, which means bench, because that is what they look like from a distance. A long, low bench of brick sitting on the desert, marking the place where someone important had been laid to rest. Picture one of these early tombs on the day it was finished. The mud brick is still fresh and pale, the edges crisp, the whole shape solid and reassuring against the pale ground. Inside, in the cool dark, there are jars of grain and oil and wine. There are tools and weapons and fine things of copper and stone. There are small carved figures and folded linens. Everything a king might need has been gathered and sealed away, so that he will want for nothing on his long journey. The living have done their part. Now they trust the desert to keep him safe. For many generations, this was enough. King after king was buried beneath his bench of brick, in the old burial grounds along the edge of the desert, and the kingdom went on. The flood came and went. The grain grew and was harvested. The years turned, slow and steady as the river. But the mastaba had a weakness, and over time people came to feel it. Mud brick does not last. The wind wears it down. The rare desert rains soften it. Year by year the proud benches slumped and crumbled, until the resting places of great kings became low mounds, hard to tell from the desert around them. For a people so deeply concerned with eternity, this was a quiet sorrow. They wanted their kings to be remembered forever, and forever, they were learning, asks for something stronger than brick. There was another thing changing too, slowly in the way people thought. The kings of Egypt were coming to be seen as more than men. They were thought to be living links between the people and the gods, divine themselves, standing at the meeting place of earth and heaven. A divine king, it seemed, deserved a tomb that rose above the ordinary, something that announced even from far away that here lay one who had been close to the gods. The low bench, however grand, sat close to the earth like the homes of ordinary people. The kings began, without quite knowing it yet, to want to rise. You can feel the shape of the future already, can you not? Even though no one in those days could have named it. A people who loved order and permanence, a king believed to be half divine. A growing wish to build something that would outlast the wind and the rain and the slow forgetting of the years. All the pieces were gathering, quietly, the way clouds gather over the southern mountains before the flood. It only needed someone with the vision to put them together in a new way. That someone was coming, but let us not rush to meet him. For now, let the picture stay soft and still. The old burial grounds in the evening light, the low brick tombs throwing long shadows, the desert wind moving grain by grain across the sand, patient and endless, wearing away at brick and waiting, though no one knew it, for stone. Let yourself sink a little deeper now. Your body is heavy and warm. The story does not need you to hold on tightly. It will keep unfolding, gentle and sure, while you rest. Two lands joined into one. Kings who dreamed of eternity. Tombs of brick that could not quite keep their promise. And just ahead, in the cool morning of a new age, a single brilliant mind about to imagine something the world had never seen. Imhotep and the first pyramid. Now, we come to one of the first people in this whole long story, whose name we still remember, and it is fitting that he was not a king at all, but a thinker. His name was Imhotep, and the way we say it is gentle, Imhotep. He served a king named Djoser, which we say Djoser, and together, around 4,700 years ago, they changed the shape of the world. Imhotep was what we might today call an architect, though he was much more besides. He was a priest, a healer, an advisor, a man of wide and careful learning. So gifted was he that long after his death the Egyptians came to honour him almost as a god, the patron of wisdom and medicine, which is a rare and remarkable thing for a man who was not born royal. But on the day our story finds him, he was simply a brilliant servant facing a familiar problem. His king needed a tomb, and the old way of building, the low bench of brick, no longer seemed enough. We do not know the exact moment the idea came to him, and it is pleasant to imagine it arriving slowly, over many quiet evenings of thought. What if a tomb did not have to be low? What if, instead of one bench, you built a bench, and then set a smaller bench on top of it, and a smaller one on top of that, and so on, each layer drawing inward, climbing step by step toward the sky? And what if you built the whole thing not from crumbling brick, but from stone, cut and shaped and stacked to last forever? This was the great leap. Stone had been used before, here and there, for small things, but no one had ever attempted to raise a whole mountain of it. Imhotep set his workers to the limestone, and at a place called Saqqara, which we say Saqqara, on the desert plateau above the old capital, they began to build. The result still stands today, and it is breathtaking in its quiet way. 6 great steps of pale stone, rising one upon another, climbing more than 60 metres into the desert air. We call it the Great Pyramid of Giza, and it is the oldest large stone building in the world that we know of. Before it, there was nothing like it anywhere. After it, the idea of building toward the heavens in stone would never go away. Picture it on the day the last stone was set. The desert sun is low and golden. The pyramid rises in clean pale steps, so new that the stone is still bright, casting a long ladder of shadow across the sand. Around its base spreads a whole walled complex of courtyards and shrines and false buildings, a stone city for the king's spirit to live in forever. Workers stand back and look up at what their hands have made, shading their eyes, and perhaps they feel what we still feel when we stand before it. A kind of hush, the sense of being in the presence of something that will outlast everything they know. Beneath the steps, deep in the rock, Imhotep's workers had carved a maze of shafts and tunnels and chambers, more than 5 kilometres of them in all, a hidden world below the visible one. At the heart of it lay the burial chamber for the king, sealed and protected, the whole vast monument above it built for this single purpose, to guard one man's journey into eternity. It is worth pausing on what this meant. A stone tomb does not crumble in the rain, it does not slump in the wind. Imhotep had given his king something the old brick benches never could, a resting place built to defy time itself. And he had given Egypt something more. He had shown that, with enough vision, and enough patient hands, and enough years, a people could reshape the very desert, could raise the ground itself toward the sky. The Step Pyramid was not yet the smooth, true pyramid shape we picture today. It was a stairway, a series of steps, and some have wondered whether the Egyptians imagined it as a great staircase by which the dead king might climb up toward the sun and the stars. We cannot be certain what was in their hearts. The old beliefs are softened now by all the years between. But there is something lovely in the thought, is there not? A stairway of stone, built so that a beloved king need never be lost, so that he might always have a way to climb home. Rest here in the long golden evening at Saqqara. The first Great Pyramid stands finished and gleaming. The man who imagined it stands quietly at its foot, his work done. He could not have known how far his idea would travel, how many greater monuments would rise from this first brave step. He only knew that he had found a way to build something that would last. And as the sun goes down and the stone turns from gold to rose to soft grey, the step pyramid keeps its long patient watch over the sleeping land, as it has done every night for nearly 5,000 years. And as it does still. Let the picture fade gently now. There is no need to hold it. Sleep is close, and the story will wait for you. Tomorrow, in the tale at least, a new king will look upon this stairway of stone and dream of something even greater. But for now, all is still. The steps are climbing softly into the dark, and everyone who built them, every one, is long and peacefully at rest. The king who practiced, Sneferu after Djoser and his stairway of stone, the idea of the pyramid did not stand still. Other kings built step pyramids of their own, some finished, some abandoned half-made when their builders died. The desert near the old capital began to gather a small family of these stepped mountains. But the shape was still changing, still searching for what it wanted to become, and the king who would push it furthest than anyone before him was a ruler named Sneferu, which we say Sneferu. Sneferu came to the throne around 4,600 years ago, at the start of what we now call the Fourth Dynasty, the golden age of pyramid building. He was, by all accounts, a builder unlike any before him. Where earlier kings had raised one pyramid each, Sneferu would raise 3, and in doing so he would move the whole art forward by a great leap. He was in a sense the king who practiced, the one who tried and learned and tried again, until the true pyramid shape was finally born. His first great attempt was at a place called Medum, which we say Meidum. There, it seems, he set out to take an older step pyramid and fill in its steps, packing the gaps with stone to make smooth, sloping sides, turning the stairway into a clean triangle reaching for the sky. It was a bold idea, the next step in the dream. But something in the design was not quite right. The outer stone was not anchored well enough to the core, and at some point, whether during building or long after, the smooth casing slid away and tumbled down in a great skirt of rubble around the base. Today the pyramid at Medum stands as a strange, tall tower surrounded by a mound of its own fallen stone. A quiet reminder that even kings must learn by trying. Let us not feel any sorrow at this. The people who built it were learning something no one had ever known. There was no book to follow, no teacher who had done it before. Every pyramid was an experiment in stone, and every lesson was paid for with sweat and time. That the casing slipped only means that the next builders would know to set it more carefully. This is how all great things are made. Not perfectly, the first time, but patiently, with many small failures folded gently into eventual success. Sneferu, undaunted, moved north to a place called Dashur, which we say Dashur, and began again. This time he aimed straight for the true smooth-sided pyramid. His workers began raising the sides at a steep, ambitious angle, climbing fast toward a high and distant point. But partway up, the builders seemed to have grown worried. Perhaps cracks appeared. Perhaps the steep angle felt unsafe, the great weight pressing in ways they had not foreseen. And so, high above the desert, they made a careful decision. They changed the angle. From that point upward, the sides lean back more gently, rising to the peak at a softer slope. The result is one of the most charming and human monuments in all of Egypt. We call it the bent pyramid because of the change in its sides, that visible moment where careful builders thought again and chose safety over pride. It still stands at Dashur, its lower half steep, its upper half gentle, the bend between them as clear as the day it was made. And remarkably, much of its smooth white outer casing still clings to it, so that of all the pyramids it gives us perhaps the best sense of how they once looked when new, gleaming and pale and whole. There is something deeply reassuring in the bent pyramid. It shows us that the great builders of Egypt were not distant, flawless beings, but thoughtful people who watched their work, who worried, who adjusted. When the steep angle seemed too much, they did not press on recklessly. They eased back. They finished the thing safely. And it has stood for 46 centuries, gentle bend and all. Still, Sneferu was not finished. He had learned from Medum that the casing must be set with care. He had learned from the bent pyramid that the angle must not be too steep. Now, not far away at Dashur, he gathered everything he knew and built once more. And this time, at last, it came together. His workers raised a pyramid with that gentler, wiser angle from the very ground up, its sides smooth and true, climbing evenly to a single point high against the sky. It was the first true, smooth-sided pyramid ever completed, the shape the whole long story had been reaching toward since Imhotep first stacked his benches of stone. We call it the Red Pyramid, for the warm rosy colour of the stone beneath its lost casing, glowing softly in the low desert sun. It is huge, nearly as large as the great monuments that would follow, and it stands serene and whole, a quiet triumph. Standing before it, you would not think of failure or of trial and error. You would think only that here, finally, was a thing made right, a mountain of stone shaped exactly as it was meant to be. So in the reign of a single patient king, the pyramid found its final form. From the stepped stairway of Djoser, through the slipped casing of Medum, through the careful bend at Dashur, to the smooth and perfect Red Pyramid, the dream had grown up, and all of it, all that learning, all that practice, was about to be handed to Sneferu's son, a young man who would take everything his father had discovered and use it to build the most famous structure in the history of the world. But that is for a little later. For now, rest in the warm light at Dashur, where two great pyramids stand side by side, one gently bent, one smooth and red, each one a lesson, each one a kindness left behind by the people who learnt so much so long ago. The desert is quiet, the work is finished, and the patient king who tried and tried and tried again until he got it right, sleeps somewhere beneath the stone he made so well. Let yourself grow heavy and still. All is calm here. All is at rest. Khufu and the Great Pyramid. Now we come to the heart of the story, the monument that more than any other has fixed itself in the imagination of the whole world. We come to the Great Pyramid of Giza, and to the king who built it, a man named Khufu, which we say Khufu. Khufu was the son of Sneferu, the patient builder, and he inherited all that his father had learned. When he became king, around 4,550 years ago, he chose a fresh and commanding spot for his tomb. He looked north of the old pyramid fields to a high plateau of bedrock on the edge of the desert, overlooking the green valley and the river beyond. We call that plateau Giza, which we say Giza. It was a wise choice. The solid rock would bear the colossal weight of what he meant to build, and from its height his monument would be seen for miles in every direction, by everyone who sailed the river or worked the fields below. What Khufu set out to raise there was not merely larger than the pyramids before it. It was larger than anything human beings had ever built, and it would remain the tallest structure made by human hands for nearly 4,000 years, a record almost impossible to grasp. Think of all the centuries, all the empires that rose and fell, all the cathedrals and towers raised across the world, and for thousands of years not one of them reached as high as this one pyramid in the Egyptian desert. That alone should make us pause in quiet wonder. The numbers, spoken softly, are almost dreamlike. The Great Pyramid was built from somewhere around 2 million blocks of stone. Most of them weigh as much as a few large men together, and some, deep inside, weigh many times more. When it was finished, it rose to nearly 147 metres, taller than a 40-storey building, its 4 smooth sides sweeping up to meet at a single point far overhead. Each side at the base stretches more than 230 metres, and the 4 corners are placed with such care that they point almost exactly to north, south, east and west. How a people without any of our modern tools achieved such precision is a question that still stirs gentle awe in everyone who studies it. But let us not get lost in numbers, for numbers are not what carries us to sleep. Let us instead imagine the place itself, in the years when the work was going on. Picture the Giza Plateau not as the quiet monument site of today, but as one of the busiest places on Earth, alive with purpose under the wide blue sky. There is the half-built pyramid, rising in great pale terraces, growing a little higher each season. There are ramps of brick and rubble sweeping up its sides, and along them move teams of workers, hauling sledges piled with stone. There is the steady rhythm of the work, the calls of the gang leaders, the creak of ropes, the hiss of sledges over wetted ground. There is the smell of dust and sweat and baking bread. And spread out below the pyramid is a whole town, built to house and feed the thousands who labour here, with bakeries and breweries and storehouses, with cattle pens and workshops and rows of simple homes. Here we must gently set aside an old and gloomy idea, the picture some of us grew up with, of vast crowds of slaves driven to build the pyramids under the whip. The truth, as far as careful study can tell us, is kinder and more interesting. The people who built the Great Pyramid were not slaves. They were Egyptians, organised into work gangs with proud names, fed well on bread and beer and fish and meat, housed in their own town, and cared for when they were hurt. We know this in part because their own modest tombs have been found near the pyramid, built with care, marking them as honoured workers, not forgotten captives. Many seem to have come for a season, as a kind of service to the king and the gods. The way people might once have gathered to raise a great barn or a cathedral, and then returned home to their villages with stories to tell. Imagine being one of them. Imagine a young man arriving at Giza for the first time, walking up from the river in the cool of the morning, and seeing the pyramid for the first time, already huge, already climbing toward the sky. Imagine the bread fresh from the great ovens, the beer thick and nourishing, the songs the gangs sang to keep their hauling in time. It was hard work, of course, hard beyond anything most of us know, but it was shared, and it was honoured, and it was done in the belief that they were helping their divine king on his great journey, and through him keeping the whole world in its proper order. There is a kind of warmth in that thought, even across all the centuries. They were not toiling in despair. They were part of something vast and sacred, and they knew it. Rest here for a while among the workers of Giza, in the warm dust of the morning, with the bread baking and the great pyramid rising slowly against the blue. Let the picture be gentle. The labour was real, but so was the food, and the friendship, and the pride. Season after season, year after year, the pyramid grew, block by patient block, under the hands of ordinary people who could not have known that what they made would still be standing, still astonishing the world, 4,500 years after they laid down their ropes and went home to rest. How a mountain was made, how was it done? How did people, without iron tools, without machines, without any of the powered help we take for granted, raise 2 million blocks of stone into a mountain so precise that its corners point to the poles of the earth? This is the question that has drawn dreamers and scholars to Giza for centuries, and the truth, as best we understand it, is in some ways more wonderful than the wild guesses. Let us walk through it slowly and gently, the way you might trace a familiar path with your eyes half closed. It begins, as so much in Egypt does, with the river. Most of the stone for the core of the pyramid came from quarries close at hand, right there on the Giza Plateau, where the workers cut blocks of local limestone from the living rock. But the finer stone, the bright white limestone for the smooth outer casing, came from quarries across the river, and the hard granite for the chambers deep inside came from far to the south, hundreds of miles up the Nile, and here the great gift of the river served the builders once again. Heavy stone is very hard to move over land, but on water it floats almost willingly. The Egyptians loaded their blocks onto barges and let the Nile carry them north, especially during the flood season when the rising water reached close to the plateau itself. The river that fed them also carried their mountain to them, piece by piece. Once the stone arrived, it had to be raised. And here we step a little into the unknown. For the Egyptians left us no manual, no drawing that says, this is how we did it. What we have instead are careful guesses built from the marks the work left behind. The most widely accepted idea is beautifully simple. The builders raised long ramps of brick and rubble and packed earth, sloping up alongside the growing pyramid, and up these ramps the work gangs dragged the blocks on wooden sledges. To ease the way, someone walking ahead would pour water onto the sand or mud in front of the sledge, and the wet ground, surprisingly, made the heavy load slide far more easily. We even have an old painting from elsewhere in Egypt that shows just this: a worker pouring water before a sledge dragging a great statue. A small detail, but a lovely one, the kind of practical cleverness that turns the impossible into the merely very hard. Exactly how the ramps were shaped, whether they ran straight up one side, or wrapped around the pyramid in a spiral, or climbed in some other clever way, we do not fully know, and gentle disagreement remains among those who study it. Perhaps it was a mixture of methods, changing as the pyramid grew taller and the work grew higher and trickier. We may never know every detail, and there is something rather peaceful in accepting that. Not every mystery needs to be solved tonight. Some can simply be held softly, admired, and set down again. What we can say with confidence is that the work was vast, organised, and astonishingly skilled. There were quarrymen who cut the blocks, and haulers who moved them, and masons who shaped them so finely that in places the joints between stones are too thin to slip a blade into. There were surveyors who kept the whole enormous shape true, checking the angles and the levels with simple tools, plumb lines and water troughs and the steady stars, and somehow keeping it all so accurate that we still marvel at it today. There were planners who fed and housed and organised the thousands, who made sure the bread was baked and the stone arrived and every gang knew its task. It was, in a sense, one of the first great feats of organisation in human history, a whole society bending itself toward a single shared purpose for decades on end. And it took decades. The Great Pyramid was likely the work of around 20 years, give or take, the labour of a generation. Think of that. A child born when the work began might have grown up watching it rise, might have carried water as a boy and hauled stone as a young man, and seen the final capstone set as he reached his middle years. The pyramid was not just a building, it was the great shared project of a lifetime, woven into the rhythm of ordinary lives, season after season, flood after flood. When at last the core was complete, the casing was added, the bright white limestone smoothed over the whole vast shape, so that it gleamed in the sun like a mountain of light. A small cap, perhaps gilded, perhaps of polished stone, was set at the very top, and then it was finished. The greatest building in the world, blazing white above the desert, visible for miles, a wonder even to the people who had made it. Let yourself rest now in the shade of that finished mountain. The dust has settled, the ramps are being cleared away, the work of 20 years stands complete and shining. The thousands who built it are setting down their tools, looking up at what their hands and their patience have raised, and feeling, surely, a deep and quiet satisfaction. They did the impossible thing, not with magic, not with machines, but with rope and stone and water and one another. And then, their great work done, they went home to their villages by the river, to sleep, as you may sleep now. All is finished, all is well, the mountain is made, and it will keep itself, for longer than anyone could dream. The mountain of white and gold, we are so used to the pyramids as they are now, rugged and bare and the colour of the desert, that it takes a gentle effort to imagine them as they first appeared, when they were brand new. And it is worth that effort, for the pyramid that stands before us today, magnificent as it is only the inner body of something that was once far more dazzling. Let us close our eyes and picture it as it truly was, on the day it was finished, more than 4,500 years ago. When the last stone was set and the work was done, the Great Pyramid did not look like a rough-stepped mountain at all. It was sheathed from base to peak in a smooth skin of fine white limestone, cut and polished and fitted so closely that from a distance the whole vast surface seemed seamless, a single unbroken slope of gleaming pale stone sweeping up to the sky. There were no steps to see, no rough edges, only smoothness, only light. And in the strong Egyptian sun, that polished white stone would have blazed, catching the light and throwing it back so brightly that the pyramid must have seemed to glow from within, a mountain of pure light standing against the blue, visible for miles in every direction, almost too bright to look upon. At the very top, the capstone may have been special, perhaps covered in gold or polished to a high shine, so that the peak caught the first light of the rising sun before anything else around, and held the last light of evening after the valley had fallen into shadow. Imagine that, in the soft grey before dawn, while the river and the fields and the town still lay in darkness, the very tip of the pyramid would suddenly catch fire with the first ray of the sun, a single point of brilliant light high in the dim sky, as though the sun itself had reached down to touch the mountain first of all. And then slowly, as the sun rose, the light would pour down the smooth white sides, the whole pyramid kindling from the top down until it stood blazing and complete in the full light of morning. The Egyptians, who loved the sun so deeply, surely meant exactly this. They built a mountain that would greet the dawn before the rest of the world, that would shine like a piece of the sun brought down to earth. Picture the 3 pyramids of Giza all together in that first age, all smooth, all white, all gleaming, standing in their line above the green valley. From the river below they must have been an overwhelming sight, 3 mountains of light rising from the desert. So bright and so vast and so perfect that they hardly seemed the work of human hands at all. A traveller coming up the Nile would have seen them from far off, glowing on the horizon, growing slowly larger and brighter as the boat drew near, until they filled the whole western sky with white fire. There can have been few sights in all the ancient world to match it. No wonder the fame of the pyramids spread to the ends of the earth. No wonder people travelled for months across deserts and seas simply to stand before them. They were, quite literally, dazzling. That gleaming skin is gone now, carried away across the long centuries to build a later city, and we have spoken of that already, and felt no sorrow in it. But it is a lovely thing, as you drift towards sleep, to dress the pyramids once more in your imagination, to wrap them again in their smooth white robe, and set their golden caps alight, and see them as the people who built them saw them, blazing and whole and impossibly bright in the morning sun. That is how they were meant to be seen. That is how they stood for the first long age of their life, mountains of white and gold, catching the dawn, throwing back the light, the proudest and brightest things in all the world. Hold that bright and peaceful image gently now. The 3 white pyramids gleaming above the green valley, the golden caps catching the first light of morning, the whole desert glowing softly around them. It is a warm picture and a calm one, full of light and stillness. Let it settle over you like sunlight on closed eyes, soft and golden and still. The mountains of white and gold stand shining in the dawn of the world, and you are drifting now, gently, into rest, while they catch the light and hold it, as they did on that first bright morning so very long ago. How they found the north there is one detail about the Great Pyramid that, the more you think about it, the more quietly astonishing it becomes, and it makes a gentle thing to turn over in the mind as you drift. It is this. The 4 sides of the Great Pyramid are lined up, with breathtaking accuracy, with the 4 directions of the world. One face looks almost exactly north, one east, one south, one west. The error is tiny, smaller than you would think possible, a fraction so small that even with all our modern instruments, we can only just better it. And these were people without a compass, without any of our tools, working 4,500 years ago. How could they possibly have found true north so perfectly? How could they have aligned a mountain of stone to the very turning of the earth? The answer, as best we can tell, lies in the sky, and it is a lovely thing to imagine. The Egyptians were patient watchers of the heavens. Night after night, year after year, they studied the slow wheeling of the stars overhead, and they came to know their movements as well as they knew the flooding of the river. And in that wheeling sky there is a secret that points the way north, if only you are patient enough to read it. If you watch the stars on a clear night, you will see that they all seem to turn slowly around a single point in the northern sky, rising in the east, sweeping across, setting in the west, the whole great dome of them turning together like a wheel. But there is one point they turn around, a still centre in the north, and the direction toward that still point is true north. The Egyptians, watching so carefully for so long, found ways to fix that direction precisely. One gentle method may have been to watch a particular star rise in the east and set in the west, and to mark the exact midpoint between those two spots, for that midpoint points true north. Another may have used the steady turning of the stars around the northern pole. We are not entirely certain which method they chose, and the uncertainty is part of the quiet pleasure of it. But somehow, by patient watching of the night sky, they found the north, and they laid their Great Pyramid down in line with it, so perfectly that we still marvel. Think of what that means. It means that on some calm, clear night long ago, before a single stone was laid, the surveyors of the pyramid stood out under the stars on the bare plateau, and watched, and measured, and waited, reading the sky the way we might read a page. It means that the Great Pyramid is not only lined up with the desert and the river, but with the heavens themselves, with the turning of the stars and the poles of the earth. The builders reached up into the night sky and brought its order down to the ground, and built it into the very foundations of their mountain. The pyramid is, in a sense, a piece of the sky's own order, made solid in stone. And this fits so beautifully with everything else we have come to understand about why the pyramids were built. These were people who looked up, who longed for the eternal, who hoped their kings might climb to join the undying stars. Of course they would align their greatest monument with the heavens. Of course they would point its faces to the four corners of the world and lay it down in tune with the turning sky. It was all of a piece, the whole vision, earth and heaven joined in one great shape of stone, a monument that belonged as much to the stars as to the sand. There is a deep peace in this thought. We sometimes imagine the ancient world as a place of darkness and ignorance, but here were people who knew the night sky intimately, who could find true north from the stars alone, who could take the faint wheeling lights overhead and use them to lay down a mountain with a precision we can barely match. They were not less than us. In their patience, in their watching, in their deep attention to the slow turning of the world, they were perhaps in some ways more. And the proof of it stands in the desert still, its faces turned faithfully to the four winds, lined up with the poles of the earth and the still point of the turning sky, exactly as careful hands set it down so very long ago. Rest now under that same turning sky. The same stars the builders watched are wheeling overhead tonight, slow and patient, turning around their still point in the north, just as they did when the surveyors stood out on the bare plateau and read the heavens to find their way. Nothing up there has hurried in all the time between. The great wheel of stars turns as gently now as it did then, and will turn as gently long after this night is gone. Let that slow and ancient turning carry you down towards sleep, soft and unhurried, while the old stars keep their patient course above the sleeping stone as they always have and always will. Inside the Great Pyramid from the outside, the Great Pyramid is a solid mountain of stone, simple and serene, but within it lies a hidden world, a careful arrangement of passages and chambers reaching deep into the heart of all that weight. Let us go inside now, slowly and softly, in our imaginations, for there is nothing to fear in this quiet place. Nothing waits in the dark but stillness, and the patient work of long dead hands. The way in leads through a low passage that descends at a gentle, steady angle into the rock beneath the pyramid. Imagine moving down it by the light of a small flame, the air cool and dry and very still, the stone close on every side, smooth beneath your hand. The passage goes down and down, far below the level of the desert floor, to a rough unfinished chamber cut into the bedrock itself. This deep chamber seems to have been an early plan, perhaps the first idea for the king's resting place, later set aside as the design changed and grew more ambitious. It sits there still, quiet and incomplete, the oldest of the pyramid's secrets. But the builders changed their minds. Somewhere along that descending passage, a new way branches off and climbs upward instead, rising back into the body of the pyramid. This ascending passage leads to the true heart of the monument, and to its most breathtaking feature. It opens suddenly into a tall, narrow, soaring corridor that climbs steeply upward through the stone, its walls rising high overhead in great smooth steps of fitted blocks. We call it the Grand Gallery, and it is one of the most beautiful spaces ever made by human hands. Imagine standing at its foot, looking up that long steep climb, the ceiling far above, every block laid with such care that the whole thing seems less built than grown, like the inside of some vast and perfect crystal. Why exactly it was made so grand, we are not entirely sure, and the uncertainty only adds to its quiet majesty. At the top of the Grand Gallery, through a low passage that makes you stoop, lies the chamber that all of this was built to hold. We call it the King's Chamber, and it is a room of dark red granite, hauled all the way from the quarries far to the south. The walls are made of great granite blocks, fitted together with astonishing precision. The ceiling is formed of enormous granite beams, each one weighing many times more than the ordinary blocks of the pyramid, lifted somehow to this height and laid across the chamber to hold back the unimaginable weight of stone above. In the chamber sits a single object, a coffer of granite, carved from one solid piece, its lid long gone. This, it is believed, was meant to hold the body of the king on his journey into eternity. Above the king's chamber, hidden in the stone, the builders did something remarkable and clever. They left a series of empty spaces, low compartments stacked one above another, topped at last by great sloping beams of stone set like a roof. The purpose of these hidden rooms seems to have been to take the tremendous downward weight of the pyramid and spread it aside, away from the chamber below, so that the king's resting place would never be crushed. It worked. For 4,500 years it has held, through earthquakes and ages, the chamber below as sound as the day it was sealed. The care of it is humbling. They thought not only of building the thing, but of keeping it safe across spans of time they could barely imagine. There is another chamber too, lower down, reached by a level passage off the bottom of the Grand Gallery. We call it, by an old habit and not for any sure reason, the Queen's Chamber, though it likely never held a queen. Its purpose, like so much here, is softened by time. Perhaps it was meant for a statue of the king, or for some part of the rituals of the tomb. From both this chamber and the one above, narrow shafts run out through the body of the pyramid, angling up toward the sky. Some have thought these were meant to point toward particular stars, perhaps to guide the king's spirit upward to join the eternal lights of heaven. Whether that is so, we cannot say for certain. But it is a gentle thought to carry, that even buried in the heart of all that stone, the builders left small windows angled toward the stars, so that their king need never feel wholly closed in. Picture it all now, this hidden architecture sleeping inside the mountain. The deep rough chamber in the bedrock, the long descending passage, the soaring Grand Gallery climbing through the dark, the red granite chamber at the heart, with its empty coffer and its clever hidden rooms above, holding back the weight of the world, and the slender shafts reaching out toward the stars, all of it sealed away when the king was laid to rest, meant never to be seen again, meant to keep its silent watch forever. It did not stay sealed forever, of course. In ages long after, others would find their way in, drawn by the old rumours of treasure, and the chambers would be opened and emptied and explored. But that is a later part of the story. For now, let it rest as it was first meant to be, dark and still and perfect, the king at peace at its centre, the great stone mountain holding him gently, the shafts pointing quietly toward the stars. There is a deep calm in that image, a resting place built with such care, by people who loved order and eternity so much that they thought of everything, even the weight of the heavens above a sleeping king. Let yourself settle into that same deep calm. You are safe and warm. The story holds you as gently as the pyramid holds its secrets. Breathe slow. Let the dark be soft around you. Inside the mountain, all is still, and has been still for longer than we can imagine, and will be still long after this quiet night is over. A day among the builders let us step away from the stone for a little while and walk down into the town that grew up at the foot of the Great Pyramid. For the people who lived there are as much a part of this story as the kings, and their ordinary days are some of the most soothing things in all of it. We tend to remember the pyramids and forget the bread, but it was the bread and the beer and the patient ordinary lives that made the pyramids possible at all. Spread out below the plateau, in the years when the work was going on, lay a whole settlement built to house and feed the thousands of workers. It was, in its way, one of the first great planned towns in the world, with rows of long galleries where the workers slept, with kitchens and storerooms, with great open bakeries and breweries working from before dawn. We know about it because patient archaeologists in our own time have dug it up, gently, brushing away the sand of 4,500 years, and found the ovens and the moulds and the bones of the meals that fed the builders. And what those remains tell us is warm and reassuring. The workers ate well. They had bread in great quantity, baked fresh each day in tall pottery moulds. They had thick, nourishing beer, which in those days was a food as much as a drink. And they had meat, more than you might expect, beef and fish and the flesh of sheep and goats, brought in from farms and herds across the land to keep the great work fed. These were not starving captives. They were valued people, cared for, kept strong. Because strong, well-fed workers were the only way the mountain would ever rise. Imagine a morning in that town. It is still dark, and already the bakeries are warm and glowing. The bakers up before everyone, mixing and kneading and setting the heavy moulds among the coals. The smell of baking bread drifts through the lanes, mixing with the smell of the river and the cooking fires and the animals in their pens. The workers stir and rise and gather, gang by gang, each group with its own proud name, calling out to one another in the half-light. There is the low murmur of many voices, the clatter of bowls, the soft complaints and easy laughter of people who have done this many mornings together and know one another well. It is, for all the hardness of the labour ahead, a homely and human scene, the sort of busy, gentle morning that has repeated itself in working towns all through history. The workers came, it seems, in shifts and seasons. Some were a permanent skilled corps, the master masons and surveyors and craftsmen who lived there year-round and gave their whole lives to the work. But many were ordinary farmers from villages up and down the river who came to serve the king for a season, perhaps during the flood months when the fields were under water and there was little farming to be done anyway. They would come to Giza, join a gang, haul stone and carry water, and learn the songs, and then in time return home to their families with their pay in bread and goods, and with stories to tell for the rest of their lives. Picture a man back in his own village, years later, an old man now, telling his grandchildren how he once helped to raise the Great Pyramid of the king, how he hauled the very stones, how the bread was fresh every morning and the gangs sang as they pulled. There is something lovely in that, the great monument woven into countless ordinary lives, remembered around countless small fires up and down the valley. When a worker was hurt, and in such heavy labour some surely were, there is evidence that they were cared for, their broken bones set and healed, allowed time to mend. And when a worker died, he was not thrown aside and forgotten. Near the pyramid, archaeologists found the modest tombs of the workers themselves, built with real care, some shaped like tiny pyramids of their own, marking the resting places of the people who built the great one. They wanted to lie near the king they had served, near the mountain they had raised, and they were allowed to. Even in death they were honoured. There is a deep kindness in that, across all the centuries. The people who did the hard work were not nameless and forgotten. They were valued in life and remembered in death, laid to rest in the shadow of the thing they made. Rest here among the builders for a while, in the warm glow of the bakeries before dawn, with the smell of fresh bread on the air and the gangs gathering in the half-light. It was hard work they did, but it was shared and honoured and well-fed and done with pride. And it is all long finished now. The town is gone, the ovens cold for thousands of years. The workers all laid gently to rest in their small tombs near the great one. But for a moment we can stand among them in the soft dark and feel the homely warmth of that ancient morning and let it carry us toward rest. as those good people themselves have rested, peacefully, for longer than we can imagine. The last journey of a king in time, after his long reign and his great building, the king died, as all people must, even those believed to be close to the gods. And here the whole purpose of the pyramid came quietly to its fulfillment. Everything, the stone, the chambers, the years of labour, had been raised for this single solemn day, the day the king would be carried home into the monument made to keep him safe forever. Let us follow that last journey gently, for the Egyptians made of death not a horror, but a careful, loving ceremony, and there is nothing to fear in it. When the king died, his people did not hurry. They believed his body must be preserved with great care, so that his spirit would always have a home to return to, and this careful preparation took many weeks. Carried out by skilled and reverent hands in a quiet place set apart. We need not dwell on the details. It is enough to say that it was done with the utmost gentleness and respect, with sweet oils and fine linen and long patient ritual, every step a prayer, the whole long process an act of devotion meant to carry the king safely across into the next life. When it was finished, the king lay wrapped and at peace, prepared for eternity, ready for the journey to his pyramid. Then came the funeral, and it would have been a vast and solemn and strangely beautiful occasion. Picture the great procession winding up from the river toward the plateau. The king's body is carried in a shrine, drawn slowly along the causeway. The long covered road that led up from a temple at the river's edge to the pyramid above. Priests walk before and behind, chanting low, burning fragrant incense that drifts in pale clouds on the still air. Mourners follow, and officials, and all the great people of the kingdom, moving slowly in the heat, their voices joined in the old prayers for the dead. Offerings are carried, food and drink and fine things, everything the king might need in the world to come. The whole kingdom, in a sense, walks with him on his last journey, up the long road toward the shining mountain. At the pyramid, the final rites are performed. There were ceremonies meant to restore to the king, in the next life, the use of all his senses, so that he might see and speak and eat and move again in the quiet country beyond. There were prayers and offerings, and the soft smoke of incense rising against the white stone. And then, at last, the king was carried inside, down through the passages that had been waiting for him, into the chamber at the heart of the mountain, and laid in his stone coffer with all the care of a people who believed they were not burying him, but launching him, gently, on the greatest voyage of all. When the rites were done and the mourners had withdrawn, the passages were sealed. Great blocks were lowered into place, plugging the corridors, hiding the way in. The workers who did this last task made their way out through narrow escape passages and sealed those two behind them, until the king lay alone at the centre of his mountain, in the perfect dark and the perfect silence, sealed away as he was meant to be. Safe, they believed, for all eternity. Above him rose the vast weight of the pyramid, held back by the clever hidden rooms, and around him lay everything he might need, and over it all stood the great shining monument, blazing in the sun, announcing to the whole world that here a king had passed into forever. It is a solemn thing, the sealing of a tomb, but let us not feel any heaviness in it tonight. To the Egyptians this was not an ending, but a beginning, not a closing of a door, but an opening of one. They believed, with all their hearts, that the king now walked in a kinder country, free of pain and fear, among the gods and the undying stars. They had done everything they could, with all their skill and all their love, to send him safely on his way. And then they returned to their lives, to the river and the fields and the turning seasons, comforted by the thought that their king watched over them still from the world beyond, keeping the sun rising and the river flooding, and the world in its proper place. Rest now in the quiet after the funeral, when the prayers have faded and the incense has drifted away, and the great mountain stands sealed and silent in the evening light. The king is at peace at its heart, launched on his long voyage, wanting for nothing. His people have done all they could, gently and lovingly, and now they too may rest. There is no sorrow left here, only the deep calm of a thing carefully and completely finished. Let that calm settle over you. All is done, All is sealed and safe and still. And the king sleeps at the centre of his mountain, as he has slept for 4,500 years, peacefully, in the dark, beneath the patient stars. The boats of the sun there is one more wonder hidden at the foot of the Great Pyramid, and it is one of the most beautiful and surprising of all. A discovery so lovely and so peaceful that it makes a perfect place to rest for a while. For buried beside the great mountain of stone, sealed in pits in the rock, the builders left boats. For thousands of years no one knew they were there. Then, a little over 70 years ago, an Egyptian archaeologist working close against the southern side of the Great Pyramid noticed something curious: a line of great stone blocks sealing what turned out to be a long hidden pit cut into the bedrock. When at last the seal was carefully lifted, after more than 4,500 years, a faint sweet smell drifted up from the dark, the scent of ancient cedar wood, still there after all that time. And down in the pit, taken apart and laid in careful order, lay the pieces of an enormous boat. It was a real ship, a full-sized vessel, longer than many houses, made of fine cedar wood brought from far away. It had been built, then taken gently to pieces, every part numbered and ordered, and laid down in the pit in its proper sequence, as though waiting patiently to be put back together. And in our own time, that is exactly what was done. Over long patient years, skilled hands lifted out the hundreds upon hundreds of pieces and reassembled them, fitting the ancient timbers back together as the builders had intended, until the great boat stood whole once more. A real ship from the dawn of history, astonishingly well preserved, sweeping up at bow and stern in the graceful curving shape of the old Egyptian craft. To stand before it is to look upon something that should not have survived at all, a wooden boat older than almost anything, as fresh in its lines as the day it was buried. Why was it there? What was a great ship doing sealed in the rock beside a mountain of stone, far from the river? Here, as so often, we touch a gentle mystery, and the answer is softened by all the years between. Some believe the boat was meant to carry the king's spirit on its journeys in the next life, perhaps to sail with the sun across the sky. For the Egyptians imagined the sun god crossing the heavens each day in a great boat, and a dead king might hope to join that eternal voyage. A boat to sail the sky, buried beside the pyramid so the king would never be without it. Others think the ship may have been used in the funeral itself, to carry the king's body across the water on his last journey, and then buried with him so that it might serve him forever. Perhaps it was both. We cannot be certain, and we need not be. It is enough, tonight, to picture it. Imagine the king's spirit, in the belief of those gentle people, sailing out across the dark sky in a boat of golden cedar, following the sun on its long curve from dawn to dusk, and around through the hidden hours of the night, sailing on forever through the great calm ocean of the heavens, never tiring, never afraid, carried smoothly on the eternal voyage among the stars. There is hardly a more peaceful image in all the long story of the pyramids. Not a king sealed in cold stone, but a king set, sailing, gently, endlessly, across the warm sky, in a beautiful boat his people built and buried, so that he need never travel the next world on foot. And there was more than one. A second pit was found nearby, holding the pieces of another great boat. Left sealed for a long while, studied with even greater care. The builders, it seems, wanted to be sure their king had everything he might need to sail the heavens, and so they gave him not one boat but more, hidden in the rock at the foot of his mountain, waiting in the dark through all the long ages, until our own time gently lifted the seals and let the sweet smell of ancient cedar rise once more into the light. Rest now with the image of the boats, the loveliest secret of Giza, a great ship of golden wood, sealed in the rock for 45 centuries, and a king imagined sailing on it forever across the calm and endless sky, following the warm sun through the dark and home again to the dawn. Let that gentle voyage carry you too. Picture the smooth glide of the boat across the great sky ocean, the soft wheeling of the stars, the warm sun ahead, the endless peaceful sailing through the dark. There is nothing to fear out there, only the long calm voyage, on and on, gentle and unhurried, the way you are drifting now, softly into sleep. Khafre, Menkaure, and the guardian of the sands, the Great Pyramid, did not stand alone for long. Khufu's son and successors looked upon what he had made and set out to join their monuments to his, until the Giza plateau held not one Great Pyramid, but three, standing together in a line across the desert, a family of mountains catching the same long light. The second of the three was built by Khufu's son, a king named Khafre, which we say Khafre. His pyramid stands close beside his father's, and at first glance it can seem even taller, though in truth it is a little smaller. The trick is that Khafre built on slightly higher ground, so that his peak rises to almost the same height, and to the eye the two seem like equals. Twin mountains side by side. Khafre's pyramid keeps a cap of its original smooth casing near its summit, a patch of the old gleaming stone clinging on near the top, giving us a small glimpse of how all three must once have shone. But Khafre is remembered for something even more famous than his pyramid, something that has become, along with the pyramids themselves, one of the great faces of Egypt to all the world. For near his pyramid, carved from a single great outcrop of living rock, crouches the vast stone figure we call the Great Sphinx. We say it Sphinx. It has the body of a resting lion and the face of a man, and it gazes out steadily toward the east, toward the rising sun, as it has done for 45 centuries. Most who study it believe the face was made to be Khafre's own, a portrait of the king joined to the powerful body of a lion, a guardian set to watch over the sacred plateau forever. Imagine coming upon the Sphinx in the early morning, when the first light reaches across the desert and touches its worn and ancient face. It is enormous, longer than many buildings, its great paws stretched out before it, its weathered features calm and patient and unbearably old. The centuries have softened it, the wind and the sand have worn away its edges, and at some point long ago its nose was lost, so that its face is gentled now, almost dreaming. But still it watches the east, still it waits for the sun. There is no menace in it, despite its size. There is only a deep, quiet steadiness, the look of something that has seen so many sunrises that one more or one less hardly matters. It has watched over the pyramids through every age since they were new, through empires and silences and the long turning of the stars, and it watches over them tonight. So much sand has blown across the Sphinx over the centuries that more than once it has been all but buried, only its great head showing above the dunes, the vast lion body hidden beneath the desert. And more than once, across the ages, people have dug it free again, clearing the sand away to look once more upon the whole guardian. There is an old, lovely story, carved on a stone slab set between the Sphinx's paws, telling of a prince who fell asleep in the shadow of the buried head, long after it was made, and dreamed that the Sphinx spoke to him, promising him the throne if he would only clear away the sand. Whether the dream was real or a tale told to honour a king, we cannot know. But it is a gentle thing to think of, is it not? A young man sleeping in the shade of that ancient face, and the old guardian speaking softly to him in his dreams. The third and last of the great Giza pyramids was built by Khafre's successor, a king named Menkaure, which we say Menkaure. His pyramid is noticeably smaller than the other two, less than half their height, and there is gentle debate about why. Perhaps the great age of giant pyramids was already beginning to pass. Perhaps the kingdom's resources were turning toward other things. But smaller does not mean lesser. Menkaure's pyramid was finished with special care, its lowest courses cased not in white limestone, but in fine red granite hauled from the south, so that its base would have glowed a warm rose against the pale sand. Some of that granite casing still clings to it today, rough and unfinished in places, as though the workers laid down their tools mid-task one day long ago and simply never returned. And so the plateau took the shape we know. 3 pyramids in a line, largest to smallest, with the Sphinx keeping watch nearby, and around them a whole sacred landscape of temples and causeways and smaller tombs, the resting places of queens and nobles and the honoured dead. From the river below, the 3 white mountains must have been an overwhelming sight, blazing in the sun, the greatest works of the greatest kingdom on earth, raised to carry their builders safely into eternity, rest now in the long golden light at Giza, with all three pyramids standing complete, and the Sphinx gazing calmly toward the east. The plateau is finished. The great age of building has reached its height. 3 kings of one family lie in their stone mountains, and the Lion Guardian watches over them all, patient and unmoving. As the sun goes slowly down, and the desert cools, and the stars come out one by one above the sleeping monuments, all is peaceful, all is at rest. Let the warm light hold you, and let yourself grow heavy, and let the old guardian keep its watch while you drift gently down towards sleep. The long quiet after great ages do not end suddenly. They fade, the way a long summer evening fades, the light slipping away so gradually that you can hardly say when day became dusk. So it was with the age of the Great Pyramids. After the 3 mountains of Giza, kings went on building pyramids for a long time. But never again would they build on quite that scale, and slowly, over centuries. The old grandeur softened into something gentler and smaller. The kings who came after Menkaure still raised pyramids, but more modest ones. Some were built with cheaper cores, rubble and mud brick faced with stone, so that when the casing was later stripped away, they slumped and crumbled into low ragged hills, far humbler than the proud monuments of Giza. The kingdom itself, the long stable order that had bound the whole Nile under one divine king, eventually loosened and frayed. There came a long, uncertain time when central power dissolved, when the great unified country broke for a while into smaller pieces, each region looking to its own. We need not dwell on those troubled years. They passed, as troubled years do, and in time Egypt gathered itself together again. When it did, in the age we call the Middle Kingdom, the kings returned to pyramid building once more, raising new monuments in the old style. But the world had changed, and so had the pyramids. These later ones were often built around cores of mud brick, grand enough when new and cased in white stone, but far less enduring than the solid mountains of Khufu and his sons. Time has not been kind to most of them. Where Giza still stands proud against the sky, many of these later pyramids have melted back toward the earth, low brown mounds that you might walk past without knowing what they once were. There is no sadness in this, only the gentle truth of all things made by hands. Some endure for an age. Most return, in time, to the quiet ground. And then, at last, the Egyptians gave up the pyramid altogether. The kings of the later age, the great pharaohs of the new kingdom whose names we still know, looked back at the pyramids of their distant ancestors and made a different choice. A pyramid, after all, announced loudly to the whole world exactly where a king lay, and over the long centuries that openness had a cost. The great tombs had been broken into, their treasures carried off, their resting kings disturbed, despite every clever effort to protect them. The hidden chambers and the ceiling stones and the rooms to spread the weight had kept the stones safe, but they could not keep out the patient curiosity of the living. So the later kings chose secrecy instead of size. Far to the south, near the city we now call Luxor, they cut their tombs deep into the rock of a hidden desert valley, a quiet place ringed by cliffs, with no great monument to mark it, only a doorway in the stone leading down into chambers carved and painted in the dark. We call that place the Valley of the Kings. There they hoped to rest unseen and undisturbed, hidden rather than glorified, safe in the silence of the cliffs. The age of the pyramid as a royal tomb was over. It had lasted, in its great form, only a few centuries, a brief, bright season in the long, long life of Egypt. But the pyramids themselves did not go anywhere. Long after the last one was built, long after the kings had turned to their hidden valley, the great mountains of Giza still stood on their plateau, blazing white above the river, growing slowly more ancient with every passing age. To the Egyptians who lived in their shadow in later centuries, they were already unimaginably old, monuments from a time beyond memory, raised by ancestors so distant they had become almost legend. Children grew up beneath them, fished in the river below them, and never knew a world without them. They were simply there, as the river was there, as the desert was there, a permanent feature of the world, older than anything anyone could remember. Let us rest here in the long, quiet centuries after the building stopped. Picture the pyramids in some ordinary evening of those later ages, no longer new, the casing perhaps beginning to dull, but still vast, still serene, still keeping their patient watch over the green valley and the slow river. The great age that made them has passed into legend. The kings who built them sleep on, and the monuments stand in the gathering dusk, as they will stand through age after age, asking nothing, simply enduring, while the world turns slowly around them and the generations come and go like the rising and falling of the flood. Breathe slow now, and let the long quiet settle over you too. There is something deeply restful in the thought of the pyramids simply standing, year after year, century after century, through every change, asking nothing, needing nothing, keeping their long calm watch. They have done it through more nights than we could ever count. They are doing it now, while you lie here in the dark, growing heavy and warm and ready for sleep. All is still on the plateau, all is at rest, and the great mountains keep their patient vigil, as they always have, and always will. A wonder of the world as the centuries rolled on and Egypt grew old, the world beyond its borders began to change in great ways. New peoples rose to power around the shores of the sea to the north. Travellers and traders and curious wanderers came to the ancient land of the Nile, and when they did, the thing they most wished to see, the thing they had heard of even in their faraway homes, was the pyramids. Among the most famous of these visitors was a Greek traveller and storyteller who came to Egypt around 2,500 years ago, when the pyramids were already more than 2,000 years old. He walked among the monuments, he spoke with the local people, and he wrote down what he was told. Some of it was true, and some of it was tangled tale, the kind of thing that grows up around very old places when no one alive remembers the real story anymore. But his writings carried the fame of the pyramids out into the wider world, and they have come down to us across all the long years since. Through eyes like his, the rest of the world first came to marvel at what Egypt had made. In time, the learned people of the ancient world made lists of the most astonishing things a traveller might see, the greatest wonders made by human hands. There were said to be 7 of these great wonders. There were towering statues and hanging gardens and gleaming temples and a mighty lighthouse scattered across the ancient world, each one a marvel in its day. But of all those 7 wonders, only one was already ancient when the lists were made. Only one had stood for thousands of years before anyone thought to count it among the marvels. And only one still stands today. All the others have fallen. The gardens withered, the statues toppled, the temples burned or crumbled. The lighthouse sank into the sea after the long shaking of earthquakes, one by one, across the centuries. The wonders of the ancient world vanished, until of all 7 only the Great Pyramid remained, standing as it had always stood, on its plateau above the river. It is the oldest of the 7 wonders, and the last one left, the sole survivor of that ancient list, still here after everything. There is something almost unbearably moving in that. Everything else its maker's world produced has gone. The pyramid simply stayed. But staying did not mean staying untouched. Over the long centuries, the pyramids suffered the slow wear of time and the hands of the living. The bright white casing stones, that smooth gleaming skin that once made the whole pyramid blaze like a mountain of light, did not last. Earthquakes loosened them, and in the medieval centuries, when a great city grew up nearby, people came to the pyramids as to a vast quarry, prying away the fine-cut casing stones and carting them off to build mosques and walls and houses in the growing city across the river. Stone that had been shaped with such care to clothe a king's eternity went instead into the ordinary buildings of a later age. And so, slowly, the pyramids lost their gleaming skin, until the rough-stepped core beneath was laid bare, the form we know today. It is tempting to feel sorrow at this, but let us not. The pyramids were not destroyed. They were only undressed, their smooth white robe carried away to live on in the walls of a great city, while the mighty body beneath stood firm. And in losing the casing, they gained a kind of honesty, the bare rugged steps showing the world exactly how they were built, course upon course, block upon block. The mountain remained. It always remained. stripped of its shining skin, worn by the wind, climbed by the curious, and quarried by the practical. Still it stood, and still it stands. The great patient survivor of a world that has otherwise entirely passed away. Through all those middle centuries, the pyramids gathered legends the way old stones gather moss. People who no longer remembered the kings who built them invented new explanations. Some said they were great storehouses built to keep grain against years of famine. Some wove them into older stories from sacred books. Some imagined they held vast treasures or secret knowledge or the bones of giants. The true story, the patient kings and the honoured workers and the long learning from Djoser to Khufu, had been forgotten, and into that empty space the human imagination poured all its wonder and its dreaming. The pyramids became a mystery, a riddle in stone, and the more mysterious they seemed, the more powerfully they drew people to them. Rest here a while in the long middle age of the pyramids, when they stood half forgotten and wholly marvelled at, stripped of their casing but not their grandeur, wrapped in legend, the sole survivor of the ancient wonders. The city across the river grows and glows in the evening. The river runs on as it always has. And the great bare mountains stand against the dusk, older than the stories told about them, older than the people who tell them, keeping their silence, holding their true history quietly within, waiting, though no one knew it, for an age that would at last begin to listen. Let your breathing slow and your thoughts grow soft. We are travelling now toward our own age, toward the time when people would begin, gently and patiently, to ask the pyramids their real questions and to listen for real answers. But there is no hurry. The pyramids have waited thousands of years. They can wait through one more peaceful night while you rest. The age of rediscovery. For a long time the true story of the pyramids slept beneath layers of legend, much as the Sphinx slept beneath its blanket of sand. Then, slowly, beginning a couple of centuries ago, the modern world began to wake to them, and to dig, and to measure, and to wonder in a new and more careful way. The age of rediscovery had begun. It is often said to have started with a great expedition that came to Egypt from the north, a little more than 200 years ago. Along with the soldiers came scholars, artists and men of learning, sent to study and record the ancient land in every detail. They measured the monuments, they drew them with loving care. They filled great volumes with pictures of temples and tombs, and of course the pyramids. And when those volumes reached the wider world, they set off a wave of fascination with ancient Egypt that has never really faded since. Suddenly the whole educated world wanted to know about this old civilization by the Nile, its strange beautiful writing, its colossal monuments, its lost and dreaming kings. And there was a key, though no one yet knew how to turn it. The Egyptians had covered their monuments in writing, in the lovely picture signs we call hieroglyphs, but for many centuries no living person could read them. The knowledge had been lost. The voices of the ancient world were all around, carved on every wall, and yet utterly silent, a language no one understood. Then came one of the great quiet triumphs of human patience. A slab of dark stone was found bearing the same message carved 3 times, in 3 different scripts, one of them a language scholars could still read, and one of them the lost hieroglyphs. By comparing them, line by line, sign by sign, over years of painstaking work, a brilliant scholar finally cracked the code and learnt to read the old picture writing once more. After more than 1,000 years of silence, the ancient Egyptians could speak again. Their own words, their kings' names, their prayers and records could at last be understood. The pyramids and temples were no longer mute. They had a voice, if only someone would patiently listen. While the scholars worked at the writing, others turned to the monuments themselves. Adventurers and early explorers came to Giza, drawn by the old rumours of treasure and the new spirit of discovery. Some were little more than treasure hunters, rough and eager, more interested in what they might carry off than in what they might learn. Others were careful and curious, true beginnings of the patient study we now call archaeology. They forced their way into sealed passages, cleared rubble from blocked corridors, and crept by lamplight into chambers that had not been entered for thousands of years. One famous strongman of an explorer managed to find the long-sealed entrance to the second Great Pyramid, Khafre's, and made his way inside to the burial chamber at its heart, the first person to do so in untold centuries. He found the chamber empty, the great stone coffer open and bare, robbed long ago in some forgotten age. He left his name written on the wall, as explorers of that bold era often did, and that scrawled name is still there, a small human mark in the ancient dark. There is something both proud and humble in it. He had reached a place sealed for millennia, and found only emptiness and silence, and so he wrote his name to say, simply, "I was here. I saw this." As so many of us long to do, before the long dark, leave some small sign that we passed this way. Not all the early exploration was gentle. Some explorers used rough methods, even gunpowder, to blast their way into the monuments, and we may wince a little now at the harm that did to such ancient and irreplaceable things. But out of even that rough work came real discovery. Forcing a way into the hidden spaces above the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid, one explorer found, painted on the stones in those sealed and secret rooms, the marks left by the original work gangs 4,500 years before. And among those marks was a name, the name of the king himself, Khufu, scrawled in red by some worker long ago and never meant to be seen again. Here at last was a thread tying the Great Pyramid firmly to the king the old traditions named, written in the very stone by the hands that built it. The legend and the truth for once agreed, bit by bit. Through all this digging and measuring and reading, the real story of the pyramids began to come back into the light. The kings emerged from legend into history, with names and dates and deeds. The honoured workers were found in their modest tombs. The long careful progress from Djoser's steps to Khufu's perfect mountain was traced and understood. The pyramids were still wonderful, still awe-inspiring, but now the wonder rested on truth rather than on fancy, and that perhaps made it deeper, to know that real people, organised and skilled and well-fed and proud, raised these mountains with rope and stone and patience, is somehow more astonishing than any tale of giants or magic. The truth, recovered so slowly and so carefully, turned out to be the greatest marvel of all. Rest now in the lamplight of that age of rediscovery, when patient hands cleared away the sand and the rubble and the long centuries of forgetting, and the pyramids began once more to tell their true story. There is something deeply peaceful in the image of it. A scholar bent over a slab of stone, slowly learning to read a forgotten tongue. An explorer creeping by flickering light into a chamber sealed for thousands of years. The slow, gentle work of remembering, of bringing the lost story home. Let that quiet patience settle over you. The forgetting is ending. The truth is coming back into the light softly the way morning comes, and you can rest while it does. Listening to the stone in our own time, the questioning of the pyramids has entered a new and gentle age. The rough explorers with their gunpowder are long gone. Today the people who study the pyramids do something far softer. They try to look inside without disturbing anything at all, to see through solid stone without moving a single block, to listen to the great mountains without ever raising their voice. It is a patient, careful, almost tender kind of science, and it has lately brought some quiet surprises. For thousands of years, the only way to know what lay hidden inside the pyramid was to dig, or to break in, or to crawl through whatever passages could be found. But modern science offers a wonderful alternative. High above us, far out in space, the universe is always raining down tiny invisible particles, born when the light of distant stars strikes the top of our air. These particles pour down through everything, through the sky, through the clouds, through us, through stone. Most pass straight through the pyramid as though it were not there at all, but a few are absorbed or turned aside by the solid rock. And if you place patient detectors inside and beneath the pyramid, and wait and count these particles for months on end, you can begin to map where the stone is solid and where it is hollow, much as a doctor sees inside the body without ever opening it. Where more particles come through, there is empty space. Where fewer come through, there is solid rock. Slowly, From this faint rain of particles from the stars, a hidden map takes shape. A great international effort set out to do exactly this, beginning about 10 years ago, placing their gentle detectors in and around the Great Pyramid and waiting for the sky to reveal its secrets. And after long patient months of counting, they found something. High up in the pyramid, above the soaring Grand Gallery, the particles revealed a large empty space, a hidden void within the solid stone. A room or a corridor or a gap that no one had known was there, sealed inside the mountain for 4,500 years. It was the first major hidden space found in the Great Pyramid in modern times, and it was found without moving a single stone, simply by listening to particles born in the light of distant stars. There is something almost magical in that, though it is pure and careful science, the universe itself quietly helping us to see. What is in that hidden space, we do not yet fully know. Whether it was a deliberate chamber, or simply a gap left in the building to relieve the great weight, or something else entirely, remains a gentle mystery, still being studied, still softly debated. And that is perfectly all right. Not every secret needs to be opened tonight. There is a deep peace in knowing that the old mountain still holds spaces no living eye has seen. Quiet rooms sealed in the dark, keeping their silence as they have done since before history began. A few years later, the same patient methods, this time using small cameras threaded gently through tiny existing gaps, revealed another hidden space, a modest corridor tucked behind the great stones above the pyramid's original entrance on its northern face. Again, its purpose is not entirely certain. Perhaps it helped to spread the weight of the stone above the doorway, easing the burden on the entrance below, much like those clever empty rooms above the king's chamber. The builders, it seems, left more cleverness hidden in the stone than we ever guessed. Small, thoughtful spaces tucked here and there to carry the weight and keep the whole great thing standing safe across the ages. The more we listen, the more we find that they thought of everything. Now, you may also have heard, in recent times, far bolder and stranger claims, whispers of vast hidden cities and enormous shafts plunging deep beneath the plateau, of whole underground worlds waiting to be found. These stories have spread widely, and they are exciting to hear. But it is only honest to tell you, gently, that such claims are not confirmed. They rest on methods that many careful scientists question, and they have not been shown to be true in the patient, tested way that real discoveries must be. Most of those who have spent their lives studying the pyramids remain doubtful. Perhaps, in time, careful study will reveal new wonders beneath the sand. The plateau may yet hold surprises, and that is a lovely thought to keep. But for tonight, we need not chase the wilder tales. We can let the deep sand lie undisturbed and rest in what is truly known, which is wonderful enough. The pyramids are real, they are vast and old and astonishing, and they still hold quiet spaces in their hearts that we are only now, ever so gently, beginning to glimpse. There is a beautiful patience in all this modern work, a humility that the old treasure hunters never had. We no longer break in, we wait and we listen, and we let the pyramid keep most of its secrets, content to learn a little, slowly, without harm. It is, in a way, the most respectful that human beings have ever been toward these monuments since the day they were sealed. We have learned, at last, to approach the old mountains softly. Rest now in that soft and patient quiet. Far inside the Great Pyramid, hidden spaces sleep in the dark, mapped faintly by particles from distant stars, holding their secrets gently still. The scientists have gone home for the night. The detectors wait in the silence, and the pyramid stands as it always has, full of quiet mysteries, asking nothing, giving up its secrets only slowly, and only to those who ask with care. Let that gentle patience be yours too. Tonight, there is nothing you need to solve, nothing you need to know. You can simply rest in the dark with the old mountain, and let its quiet hold you, and drift. What the pyramids were for we have followed the pyramids across thousands of years, from the first idea to the great mountains of Giza to the patient science of our own age. But let us pause now, in the quiet, and ask the gentlest question of all. Why? Why did a whole people pour the labour of generations into raising these enormous shapes of stone? What were the pyramids truly for? The answer, as far as we can softly understand it, is among the most beautiful things in this whole story. The pyramids were, at heart, machines for eternity. They were built to carry a king safely out of this life and into the next, and to keep him there, secure and provided for forever. To the people of ancient Egypt, the king was not only a ruler, but a sacred being, a living bridge between the world of people and the world of the gods. When he died, his journey was the most important journey in the world, for upon it depended the order of everything. A king safely settled in the next life would go on caring for his people from beyond, would keep the sun rising and the river flooding and the grain growing, would hold the whole world in its proper place. The pyramid was built to make sure that journey succeeded. It was an act of love in a way, and an act of order, and an act of hope, all raised together in stone. And why that particular shape, the great triangle reaching to a point? Here we touch on something tender and uncertain, for the old beliefs are softened by all the years between, and we must speak with the gentle vagueness that honesty requires. But many believe the pyramid's shape was tied to the sun, which the Egyptians held sacred above almost all else. Perhaps the sloping sides were imagined as a ramp or a stairway of sunlight, by which the king's spirit might climb up to join the sun in the sky. There is an old image of the sun's rays slanting down through a gap in the clouds, spreading out in a great pale triangle of light reaching from heaven to earth. And some have felt that the pyramid was meant to be that very ray made solid, a beam of sunlight frozen into stone, a path by which the king could climb home to the light. Whether that was truly in their hearts, we cannot say for certain, but it is a lovely thought to hold as you drift, the Great Pyramid as a ray of sunlight turned to stone, a stairway for a beloved king to climb up toward the warmth of the eternal sun. There may have been other meanings woven in as well, meanings we only half understand. The careful placing of the pyramid toward the points of the compass, the slender shafts angled up toward particular stars, all suggest that the builders were thinking not only of the earth, but of the sky, of the great turning wheel of stars overhead, the unchanging lights that never fell below the horizon, that seemed to live forever in the northern night. Perhaps they hoped their king would join those undying stars, would become one of the eternal lights wheeling slowly through the dark, never setting, never dying, shining on above the sleeping land forever. We cannot be sure. The exact dreams of those distant people are gentled now, beyond our certain reach. But we can feel the shape of their hope, can we not? The longing to make death not an ending but a passage, to build a stairway of stone and sunlight by which the dead might climb up to live forever among the stars. There is something in that longing that belongs to all of us, across all the ages. The wish that those we lose are not truly gone. The hope that there is somewhere beyond this life, quiet and kind, where the ones we love rest safely and want for nothing. The Egyptians felt that hope so deeply that they bent the whole power of their kingdom toward making it solid, raising mountains of stone to carry their kings gently into the forever they imagined. And in doing so, without meaning to, they built something that has itself become a kind of eternity. For the kings they buried are long gone, their bodies vanished, their treasures scattered. But the pyramids remain. The hope, carved into stone, outlasted everything. The longing for forever became the one thing that actually lasted. So when we look at the pyramids, we are not only looking at tombs, or feats of engineering, or wonders of the ancient world, though they are all of those things. We are looking at a vast and tender act of hope, the hope of a gentle people who could not bear to think that death was the end, who loved order and beauty and permanence, and who reached out across the void with rope and stone and patience to build a path toward forever. That, more than any hidden chamber or clever ramp, is the real secret of the pyramids. They are hope made solid. They are love and longing turned to stone. Rest in that thought now, softly, as you drift towards sleep. The pyramids were built so that those who were loved need never be wholly lost, so that there might always be a stairway home, a path up toward the warm and unfailing light. It is a gentle thing to carry into the dark. The old builders believed, with all their hearts, in a quiet country beyond this life, where the weary rest and want for nothing. And whether or not they were right, they left us their hope, standing in the desert, 4,500 years tall, reaching ever upward toward the light. Let that hope hold you gently now. Let yourself grow heavy and warm and unafraid. All is well, all is at rest. And the great stairways of stone are reaching, even now, quietly upward toward the stars. The wider field of stone, when most of us picture the pyramids, we see the three great mountains of Giza, standing in their famous line with the Sphinx nearby. And rightly so, for they are the grandest and most perfect of all. But it is worth knowing as you drift that Giza is only one small part of a much larger story written across the desert. Egypt is scattered with pyramids, more than 100 of them, strung out along the edge of the desert near the old heart of the kingdom, each one a chapter in the same long tale. To the south of Giza lie the older fields where the whole idea began. There is Saqqara, where Imhotep raised the very first Great Pyramid, the stepped stairway of Djoser, still standing after nearly 5,000 years. Around it spread other pyramids and countless tombs, a vast and ancient burial ground used for thousands of years, layer upon layer of the honoured dead, the oldest sacred landscape in the country. To walk there is to walk through the deepest roots of the whole story, the place where stone first reached for the sky. Nearby lies Dashur, where patient Sneferu learned his craft, where the bent pyramid still leans gently against the desert with its careful change of angle, and where the red pyramid stands smooth and whole and serene. The first true pyramid ever finished. These two monuments, side by side, are like a quiet lesson left in the sand, the very moment the pyramid found its perfect form, preserved for anyone who comes to look. There is something deeply moving in seeing them, the trial and the triumph standing together, the proof that even the greatest things are made by learning and patience and trying again. Further afield are the smaller, humbler pyramids of later kings, many of them worn down now to low brown mounds, their fine casing long gone, their mud brick cores melting slowly back toward the earth. You might pass them without knowing what they were, gentle swellings in the desert that once blazed white against the sky. There is no sadness in them, only the soft truth of time. They had their season of glory, now they rest, quietly returning to the land, as all things made of earth eventually do. And it is worth saying, gently, that the longing to build toward the sky was not Egypt's alone. Far across the world, in lands the Egyptians never knew existed, other peoples in other ages raised their own great mounds and step temples and pyramids of stone, reaching upward in their own ways toward their own heavens. The human heart, it seems, has reached for the sky in many places and many times, piling up the earth and the stone to come a little closer to whatever it holds sacred. But the pyramids of Egypt are the oldest and the largest and the most perfect of them all, the ones the whole world pictures when it hears the word, the ones that have stood the longest and stirred the most wonder. They are the great elders of all the world's reaching, the first and the finest, still standing while so much else has passed away. So when you picture the pyramids tonight, you might let your mind widen just a little beyond the famous three, out across the whole long edge of the desert, where more than 100 of them stand or slumber, a great field of stone, stretching for miles, every monument a king's hope, every one raised by patient hands across the long centuries of a remarkable people. The grand and the humble, the perfect and the worn, the famous and the forgotten, all of them resting together in the same desert under the same wide sky, keeping the same long silence, holding the same old hope of forever. Let that wide and peaceful picture settle over you. The whole desert edge, dotted with pyramids, glowing softly in the last of the light, falling slowly into the blue of evening. So many monuments, so many kings, so many patient hands, all at rest now, all quiet now, spread out beneath the gathering stars. There is room in that vast stillness for you to rest too. Let yourself grow heavy. Let the great field of stone keep its silence around you. And let yourself drift down into it, soft and safe and unhurried. And if your mind wanders, as minds do at the edge of sleep, let it wander gently among them. Picture yourself walking very slowly along that desert edge in the cool of evening, with all the pyramids around you, the great ones and the small ones, the perfect ones and the worn ones, each standing quiet in the falling light. There is no need to hurry, no need to reach any particular one, no need to arrive anywhere at all. You can simply drift along the soft sand in the blue dusk, past monument after monument, each one keeping its own long silence, each one holding its own old hope. The whole vast field of them stretching away before you and behind you into the gentle dark. The air is cool and still. The first stars are out. The sand is soft beneath your feet. And every pyramid you pass has stood here, patient and unmoving, for thousands upon thousands of quiet nights, and will stand for thousands more, asking nothing, needing nothing, simply resting in the desert under the wide and ancient sky. Let your slow wandering among them carry you down, softer and softer, into sleep. The pyramids today, and now at last, we come to the pyramids as they are tonight, in our own age, after everything. Let us go to them gently, the way you might visit an old and beloved place at the close of a long day, and simply stand before them and let the long story rest. The world around the pyramids has changed beyond all recognition. The great city across the river, once a distant glow, has spread and grown until its edge now reaches almost to the foot of the plateau itself. Where once there was only desert and the slow river, now there are roads and houses and the hum of millions of lives, pressing close against the ancient stones. By day, the pyramids are among the most visited places on all the earth. Travellers come from every country in the world to stand before them, to crane their necks at the impossible height, to lay a hand against stone laid down 4,500 years ago, and feel, for a moment, the dizzying depth of time. Cameras click. Voices murmur in 100 languages. Camels wait patiently in the heat. The plateau by day is alive with the wonder of the whole world, gathered to look upon the one surviving wonder of the ancient one. It can be a busy place, in the daylight, full of movement and noise, but that is not how we will leave it tonight. For the pyramids have another face, the one they wear when the crowds have gone home, and the sun has set, and the desert returns to its older silence. Let us stay for that. Imagine the plateau in the last light of evening, after the gates have closed and the visitors have drifted away. The noise fades. The long shadows stretch and join and deepen into dusk. The city across the way begins to glitter with its evening lights, a sea of small bright stars spread along the river. But up here on the plateau the old quiet returns, settling over the stones like a soft blanket. The pyramids stand against the darkening sky, their hard edges softening in the failing light, growing vast and dim and ancient, the way they must have looked to every generation that ever watched the sun go down behind them. The air cools. The desert wind picks up a little, moving grain by grain across the sand, the same patient wind that has been wearing gently at these stones since before history began. The Sphinx settles into shadow, its worn face turned east as always, waiting, as it has waited through every night for 45 centuries, for a sunrise still many quiet hours away. And the three great pyramids loom in the deepening dark, no longer the bustling monuments of the daytime crowds, but something older and stiller and far more profound, mountains of stone, keeping their long vigil over a world that has changed past all knowing, while they have hardly changed at all. The stars come out above them, the same stars the builders watched, the same undying lights wheeling slowly through the northern sky toward which the old kings hoped to climb. The pyramids and the stars regard each other across the dark, as they have done every clear night for thousands of years, the stone reaching up and the light reaching down, the old hope and the eternal sky meeting quietly above the sleeping desert. There is no one to see it now. The plateau is empty and still. But it happens anyway, Every night, whether anyone watches or not, the great patient meeting of stone and stars in the silence. Think of all that these monuments have outlasted to be standing here tonight. Empires rose and ruled the world and crumbled into dust while the pyramids stood. Languages were born and spoken and forgotten while the pyramids stood. Kings and conquerors and whole peoples came and went. The river rose and fell 10,000 times. The very faith and ways of the land changed utterly. And through all of it, every bit of it, the pyramids simply stood, asking nothing. Keeping their silence, enduring, they have seen more nights than anything else made by human hands. They are seeing one more now, this very night, while you lie here in the dark, drifting towards sleep. And they will see countless more after this one, long after this quiet night is gone and forgotten, standing in the desert under the wheeling stars, as patient and as silent as they have always been. And here is a gentle thought to hold as you lie in the dark. The very stars above the pyramids tonight are the same stars that shone the night the last stone was set, the same patient lights the surveyors watched to find the north, the same undying fires the old kings hoped to join. Nothing up there has changed. The pyramid has worn its long centuries, lost its gleaming skin, watched the world transform around it, and still the same stars wheel slowly overhead exactly as they always have, joining this quiet night to that distant one across all the thousands of years between. You are resting beneath the same sky the builders rested beneath. The same soft dark holds you that held them. There is something deeply comforting in that, a quiet thread of stillness running through all the ages, unbroken, from their sleep to yours. Rest now in that vast and peaceful dark on the Giza plateau. The crowds are gone. The city glitters far off and small. The wind moves softly over the cooling sand. The Sphinx waits for a distant dawn, and the great pyramids stand black against the stars, keeping the long watch they have kept since the beginning. There is nothing here to trouble you, nothing to fear, only the deep, old, gentle stillness of a place that has seen everything and been worn by nothing, holding its silence over the desert, as it will hold it long after we are all at rest. Let that ancient peace settle deep into you now. You are safe. You are held. And all is quiet on the plateau, as it has been through more nights than the stars can count. Good night. We have come a long way tonight, you and I, all the way from a slow green river in the desert to the great dark plateau under the stars, across nearly 5,000 years, gently, without any hurry at all. Let us draw it all softly together now, one last time, as you settle into sleep. We began with the river, the patient Nile that flooded each year and left behind the dark, rich earth, the gift that let a people settle and grow and dream. We watched two lands become one beneath a single king, and we saw how those early people looked upon death, and saw not an ending but a doorway, a passage into a quiet country beyond. We saw the first low tombs of brick, the benches on the sand, and we felt the gentle wish growing, the longing for something that would not crumble, that would carry a beloved king safely into forever. We met Imhotep, the brilliant gentle thinker, who stacked his benches of stone one upon another and raised the first great pyramid, the stepped stairway of Giza, the oldest large stone building in all the world. We watched patient Sneferu learn his craft, through the slipped casing at Maidum, through the careful bend at Darsha, until at last the true smooth pyramid was born, glowing red and perfect in the desert sun. And we came to Khufu, and to the greatest of them all, the Great Pyramid of Giza, raised by honoured workers fed on bread and beer. 2 million blocks lifted by rope and sledge and water and patience into the tallest thing humankind would build for thousands of years. We went softly inside it, down the long descending passage, up the soaring grand gallery, into the red granite chamber at its heart, with its clever hidden rooms above, holding back the weight of the world. We stood before the Sphinx as it gazed east toward the sun, and we saw the 3 great pyramids take their places in their famous line. We watched the long quiet centuries roll over them, the casing carried away, the legends gathering, the pyramids standing on as the sole surviving wonder of the ancient world, the one thing that stayed while everything else passed away. We saw the slow age of rediscovery, the lost writing read again, the sealed chambers opened, the true story coming gently back into the light. We marvelled at the patient modern science that listens to particles born in the light of distant stars to map the hidden spaces in the stone, and we set aside the wilder tales to rest in what is truly known, which is wonderful enough. And we came at last to understand, as far as we gently can, what the pyramids were truly for. Not just tombs, not just wonders, but hope made solid, the longing of a tender people that those they loved need never be wholly lost, that there might always be a stairway home, up toward the warm and unfailing light. And now we have left them in the dark, the great pyramids on their plateau, standing black against the stars, as they have stood through more nights than anyone could ever count. The crowds are gone. The desert wind moves softly over the sand. The Sphinx waits, patient as ever, for a dawn still many quiet hours away. And the old mountains keep their long calm watch over the sleeping world, asking nothing, needing nothing, simply enduring, as they always have, as they always will. There is nothing left for you to do now. The story is told. The long road is walked. Every king we met is at peace in the deep silence. Every worker who hauled the stone laid down his rope long ago and went home to rest. Everyone in this whole long tale, every single one, has been at rest for thousands of years, quiet and untroubled beneath the same wide sky that holds you now. There is no sorrow left anywhere in it, only the deep, soft peace of things long finished and long at rest. So let yourself rest too. Let your body grow heavy and warm and still. Let your breathing slow, soft and even, like the wind moving gently over the sand. There is nothing you need to hold on to, nothing you need to remember. The pyramids have stood for thousands of years without your watching, and they will stand for thousands more. And tonight they ask nothing of you but that you rest, as everyone in their long story now rests, peacefully, completely, under the patient and unchanging stars. Picture them one last time, the great pyramids in the dark, the Sphinx gazing quietly east, the stars wheeling slowly overhead, the soft wind moving over the cooling sand. All is still, all is safe, all is at rest, and has been for longer than we can imagine, and will be long after this gentle night has passed. Let that ancient, unhurried peace carry you down, soft and slow, into sleep. Sleep now. The desert is quiet. The stars are bright above the old stone, and everything, everyone, all of it, is gently, completely at rest. Good night.